I can do the intro. So, hello, Mr. McAllister. I would like to welcome you for this interview. And to introduce you to other people, you are a member of the European Parliament. You're currently in Brussels, as I'm correct. And you are also the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I would like to welcome you to my stream. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning from Brussels. Happy to be with you.
Thank you very much. I have prepared a few questions and I would like to talk about Ukraine, foreign affairs, and things that happen in the world. So, first of all, there have been multiple reports about the EU buying gas and liquefied gas from Russia. Could you explain how this situation works? Does the European Union avoid sanctions, or what is actually happening in the world?
Since the beginning of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022, the European Union has sanctioned the Russian Federation, now with 12 sanctions packages, and the 13th sanctions package might be adopted. And one of the main aspects was that we definitely need to bring down the amount and the numbers of energy imports from Russia. That's why oil imports from Russia have been sanctioned, also gas imports. And we are successful here. Just to give you one number, in the third quarter of 2021, 39% of our gas imports in the EU came from Russia. In the third quarter of 2023, just 2 years later, it was down to 12%. So these sanctions are working, but still, our energy imports from Russia are still too high. And you've mentioned an important question, LNG imports. The European Parliament has been very clear. We are calling for an overall total ban of LNG and LPG imports from Russia. And this also includes the shipping of Russian LNG imports. So we still have some work to do. This definitely needs to change.
Can you specify when exactly can we expect this change? So when will the European Union ban these gases and when will it happen so that Russia doesn't receive our money?
Well, we're working on this. In the end, we need an agreement of all 27 EU member states. Some member states who are more dependent on Russian energy imports are hesitant than others who are not so dependent. Of course, this is also a question of geography. This is a question of contractual commitments which we need to respect. But on the other hand, we have to be very clear. We want to support Ukraine as long as it takes and whatever it takes. And this also includes to further sanction the Russian Federation so Russian money cannot be used to finance this illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. So this is a responsibility, and this means that we have to continue our work on this. And the Commission is working on this matter. We need all 27 member states to agree. The European Parliament has very clearly made its voice here heard.
Now, I do not know if this information is allowed to go public, but could you explain to us how exactly is the legal or the negotiation process happening between the Commission and the Parliament? So, how exactly do you plan to convince those member states to join the trilogue and actually support the resolution? So, what is the European Union doing in this regard?
Well, we've already adopted 12 packages of sanctions, and never before has the European Union in any kind of way sanctioned a third country like the very, very good and obvious reasons we are now sanctioning the Russian Federation. The European Commission has experts who are dealing with this matter, very, very skilled civil servants, and they will identify where are certain fields where we can put additional pressure on the Russian Federation step by step. And the question is, will there be a 13th sanctions package? If yes, when? These are highly political questions. And by now, you can also say that most fields have been identified where we can sanction the Russian Federation. Anyhow, the Commission experts work on this. They reach out to the 27 member states, they ask for proposals, they check their proposals, but in the end, it's a political decision that needs to be taken. All I can do as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee is appeal to member states that we continue to show unity. Our unity is our strength. And until now, the European Union has shown remarkable unity in supporting Ukraine on the one hand, and a humanitarian way, militarily, financially, economically, and on the other hand, putting maximum pressure on the regime of Mr. Putin.
Thank you very much for the answer. I will move to the second topic that I would like to talk about, and that is the attempt to join Ukraine as a member of the European Union. So currently, there have been several negotiations. There are also concerns about the democratic processes with regards to Ukrainian government. What exactly is the situation right now, and what does the EU plan to do within the upcoming years?
In December, the 27 heads of government, the European Council, took a historic decision to officially greenlight the beginning of accession negotiations with Ukraine and with the Republic of Moldova. Ukraine is clearly on a European Atlantic integration path. Ukraine wants to become a member of the European Union, and we are ready to support the Ukrainians, just like the Moldovans, in this endeavor. Of course, it's a long way, but if we now decide that, based on the reports of the Commission, we want to begin the negotiations, this is already acknowledging the improvements that have been made in Ukraine, despite the incredible pressure and the challenges because of this war of aggression. Ukraine is working on reforming the judiciary, fighting corruption, modernizing administrative structures. And now we can begin these accession negotiations. Of course, becoming member of the European Union is a long, long journey, and it's very hard work. And in the end, every country needs to be judged on its own individual progress and its merits. The EU accession process is a regatta, not a convoy. And in the end, a member state has to fulfill all the necessary conditions politically, financially, economically, and also judicial wise. But in this long journey, we, the European Union, the member states, the European Commission, the European Parliament, we want to give Ukraine all the necessary support.
Could you specify if you have the necessary information about what what has the Ukrainian government done in order to improve its situation? And if this is something that cannot be currently disclosed, I would like to ask what is the long-term projection, as into how many years can we estimate for the Ukraine to become a part of the European Union?
A state can join the European Union once this country is ready and the European Union is ready to accept this new member state. That's why it's difficult to predict how long this will take. And I don't think it makes much sense to name a certain year. The process is clear. The accession process means that in the end, the entire EU acquis, that means the whole EU legislation, needs to be adopted and implemented in a new member state, and all the criteria. And that means the entire criteria needs to be fulfilled politically, economically, financially, and especially when it comes to the judiciary. So it's a long, long journey, but Ukraine is ready to embark on this journey. They have clearly shown their commitment towards Europe. And another thing is important for us, that in the meantime, while we are negotiating the EU accession process of Ukraine, Moldova, and also other countries in the Western Balkans, we should step by step already integrate them in certain structures of the European Union. That's why I'm very much in favor of, before these countries actually join the EU, that they are already invited to gradually participate in the single market, that they gradually participate in EU support programs, so that the citizens and the businesses already have a benefit before finalizing the EU membership application process. I think this is also in our interest because we have a responsibility to support our partners in the Western Balkans and in Eastern Europe on their way to become a member of the European family. And a final point, the reconstruction of Ukraine, which will be necessary, and we will support Ukraine in its reconstruction process, should already be organized in a way that this country is ready to be integrated in EU structures.
Thank you very much for the answer. In order for Ukraine to become member of the European Union, it has to at least somehow win the war or succeed in their fight against Russia. Currently, the European Union is supplying both humanitarian and just offensive weapons. My question would be: has the Union considered supplying stronger weapons, such as long-range cruise missiles, or any kind of new advanced military equipment?
The brave Ukrainian women and men are not only defending their own country and their own liberty and their own freedom, they are defending the European peace and security architecture. There's so much at stake in this war, and that's why EU member states, NATO allies, and others, we are supporting Ukraine in their right to defend their country against this brutal war of aggression of the Russian Federation against the Ukrainian people. We have said that we will support Ukraine as long as it takes. That was a good decision. But it's also about giving Ukraine what the Ukrainians need to successfully conduct their military operations. And that's why what the brave Ukrainian soldiers need most desperately are weapon and ammunition. And that's why we call, as European Parliament, on our member states to step up the production of ammunition, to step up the production of weapons, and to deliver what the Ukrainians need. The European Union itself doesn't have ammunition or military capabilities. We don't have weapons in our depots, but we can finance to buy weapons and ammunition, what we are doing through the European Peace Facility for the first time. And we call on our member states to give what they can give. And this includes also, from my point of view, the most sophisticated missiles, what the Ukrainians desperately need to attack the Russian support lines.
Thank you very much. We're currently in, let's say, a half of our interview. So I would like to move to, let's say, a second field of topics, and that is questions about other countries and foreign affairs that are happening
Sure.
concerning Europe. So one of the things that is happening is that a lot of European members or members of the European Union are trading with China. As you probably know, China is both a competitor to the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen was addressing their issue with subsidizing their markets. My question would be: what is the limitation with regards to both human rights and economic intervention at which the European Union would stop trading with China and impose sanctions similar to Russia?
In dealing with China, I would always follow the three English C's. That means the EU China relationship should be coined under the 3 points: cooperate where possible, compete where needed, confront when necessary. And as you said, China for us is many things in one. China is a cooperation partner, for instance, on climate change. But on the other hand, China is a competitor. China has a strong economy, just like we do. But what we need is a free and fair competition with China. We need a level playing field, especially for our small and medium sized businesses in Europe, which they don't have at the moment on the Chinese market. But China is also a geopolitical rival. China has very different views than we do when it comes to human rights, when it comes to the freedom of speech, to civil rights within China. But China is also a very assertive player on the global arena, in the global arena, and we make very clear to our Chinese counterparts the international rules-based order needs to be defended and protected, because only the international rules-based order defends medium and small-sized countries against the bullies. We also call on China to strengthen multilateral cooperation, which is very important for us in Europe, but also in the United States. So, what is the solution? We need to readjust our relations with China. We don't want to have a confrontation with China, but we have to make it very clear where we stand. And I think it's very important in dealing with China. You need to be principled in your political positions and in your values. And we need to decrease the dependencies with and of China. That also means that what we need to do is not to decouple economically. We want to interact with China economically. It's about de-risking. We need to reduce the risks in dealing with China, and that's why we have put some legislation forward in recent years. I would always mention the European Chips Act or the European Raw Materials Act. We need to diversify our supply chains. We need to decrease the dependencies with China.
Understandable. Thank you very much. I would like to ask about the principle that you've mentioned. So we need to focus our cooperation or the interactions with China based on certain levels. The question I would ask is, for many people from the Generation Z, my generation, it is important that China follows not only international laws but also doesn't breach human principles or human rights. When it comes to Chinese extremes or what they have been doing with regards to Uyghurs or the risks associated with Taiwan, what is the limitation or the principal stance when it comes to the European Union? And when would it say this is too much? We need to confront rather than cooperate.
The European Union, especially the European Parliament, are staunch defenders of human rights all over the world. Human rights count globally, and we want to promote, we want to support, we want to defend human rights not only in Europe but all over the world, including in China. And that's why we have been principled in our messages to the Communist Party leadership in Beijing that the human rights situation in China is dire and that we have very, very different views on how to deal with citizens. You mentioned the fate of the Uyghurs. For me, that is the most systematic violation of human rights over such a long period of time we have seen in the last decades. So, yes, we have very different views of the Chinese Communist Party in China. What can we do? I think we need to be principled, and our strength as European Union is that we are an economic power. We are an economic superpower. This is where we can actually play a role. And I would always say that those who want to do business with Europe, those who are more on our side when it comes to defending important values and principles, should be able to do more and better business with us than others. This is the best way we can gain influence. And of course, apart from that, we have to be clear in our political positions in the United Nations, in international fora, wherever we are together with Chinese. We need to address these matters. And what I have learned in dealing with Chinese is the more self-confident you are, the more principled you are, the more respect you might find and the more you might be listened to.
Thank you very much for the answer. I also would like to ask about the relations that European Union has with other countries, particularly USA. The upcoming elections are happening not only in European Union but also America, where they have to choose their new president, and there is a risk, or at least for me personally, it is a risk of Donald Trump winning his candidacy. Now, of course, European Union has to be political with regards to trying to deal with different presidents or different politicians. What is the approach that the European Union is going to take after the elections, regardless of whether Biden or Trump wins?
Well, we're all waiting for the US elections on the 5th of November, and it will be up to the American people to decide who their next president will be. If there will be another term for Mr. Biden, or if Mr. Trump might get the possibility of re entering the White House. We can't decide this. We will have to wait for the decision of the American people. But we, as the European Union, need to be prepared for both outcomes of the election. The United States are our most important ally and partner. The United Nations is the key ally in NATO, and NATO protects our liberty, our freedom in Europe. So the US is the security provider for us in Europe. That's why we have a huge interest in maintaining excellent transatlantic relations. And the United States is also by far our most important economic partner, our most important trade partner. So whatever the next US administration will look like, I would always advise our member states and the European Union to reach out to identify people on both sides of the aisle in the Congress, Republicans, Democrats, to work on strengthening transatlantic relations. The first 4 years of Mr. Trump in office in the White House were a bumpy ride for us in the European Union. We know that Mr. Trump is often unpredictable in his policies. He has been unpredictable in talking about the transatlantic alliance. We had some hiccups when it comes to trade. We had him questioning the Article 5 obligation in NATO. He was also talking about withdrawing United States troops from the European Union. So we know from the first 4 years that it was a bumpy ride. But let's wait and see. First of all, it's the American people who will decide on the 5th of November. And I think it's fair to say that many, many people in Europe will be keeping their fingers crossed for one candidate.
I understand. Thank you very much. With regards to, again, other countries and the affairs happening in the world, I would assume your work has to be quite tough because of all the different things that are happening. One of the recent ones is the conflict between Israel and Palestine. So, what is the current European Union stance on the matter? Because of the ICJ, so International Court of Justice, ruling that Israel has to do as much as possible to prevent genocide in Gaza. Does the European Union believe that Israel has been committing genocide, or what is the principled stance that the EU has been taking?
You were asking about the European Union's position on this war. First of all, the European Union recognizes that Israel has a legitimate right of self-defense after this outrageous, horrific terrorist attack of the 7th of October. Israel is fighting a war against the terrorist organization Hamas, and Israel is fighting this war. But Israel, of course, is obliged to respect international law and international humanitarian law. The European Parliament has called for a ceasefire, but under two very important conditions. The first one, all hostages need to be released, all hostages immediately. And second, the Hamas structures need to be totally dismantled. There cannot be a future for the Gaza Strip with Hamas. So that's our first position. Our second position has always been the European Union supports a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine as two independent states living next to each other, and we support the policy of reconciliation. We would see Jerusalem as the joint capital of these two states. We should be starting to implement concrete reforms on this peace and reconciliation path now. When it comes to the situation in Gaza, I mean, the humanitarian situation is just a catastrophe in Gaza. Far too many people have been killed. The civilian population is suffering, and they are suffering under the war on the one hand, but they're also suffering because Hamas is using civilians as human protection shields against Israeli military operations. When it comes to UNRWA, the European Union is by far the largest donor of financial support to the Palestinians. And we are proud of that, but we call on the international community to also engage more in supporting the Palestinians. But the allegations, the accusations against the UNRWA people now is so outrageous. There needs to be a thorough and comprehensive investigation into this matter. The people responsible need to take the appropriate consequences for their horrible actions. Not a cent of European taxpayers' money should be used and must be used to finance terror. We are very clear as European Parliament. That's why in the next plenary week in Strasbourg, we will be debating these recent outrageous allegations against UNRWA staff. And we will also have in my Foreign Affairs Committee, together with the Development Cooperation Committee, we will also have a briefing and an exchange of views with representatives of UNRWA, what actual consequences is this organization now taking?
Yeah, thank you very much. My last question would be also about the ICJ ruling, so the prevention of genocide in Gaza. As you have mentioned yourself, the humanitarian situation is catastrophic. Uh, how exactly can the European Union at this point help to prevent any further damages, any further destruction? Is there any attempt to either negotiate with Israel or the government of Netanyahu to accept a two-state solution, or what exactly will the European Union do in this matter?
On the one hand, the European Union, our member states, we're all working around our diplomatic channels, trying to find a solution that the killing of innocent civilians can stop. I have mentioned, for instance, the proposal of the European Parliament for a ceasefire, but with conditions which need to be met. On the other hand, what the European Union is doing is that we are giving support to the people, to the civilians. We are supporting the Palestinian people who are suffering under these military actions. And by the way, we are giving also financial, humanitarian support to the people of Gaza who have suffered for so long under the regime of these criminal terrorists of Hamas.
Thank you very much for the answer. I think we're going to the end or heading to the end of our interview. Thank you for joining. I hope you have a really good day. And with regards to both your committee, your votes, and everything else that you have to do in Brussels, thank you for hosting me and have a lovely day.
Thank you. All the best from Brussels.
Of course. Goodbye.